Living on her best friend's couch while dealing with a breakup was the worst time for anyone to find out that they were pregnant. But sometimes, life throws stuff at people without minding their state of mind and their financial responsibility. Several weeks back, Linda caught her boyfriend of 3 years in bed with his ex-girlfriend. The same ex-girlfriend that he had badmouthed severally to her. And when she walked in on them, they were not shocked. It was as though they planned for her to even meet them in bed together, laughing and talking. It was even more infuriating because her boyfriend, Eric, did not see anything wrong with what he did. She was not sure that she would have forgiven him, but if he had at least chased after her when she ran out, it would have eased the pain. It would have made her feel like she was still a human being, like her feelings were valid. Instead, he raised his eyes from his ex-girlfriend's face to look at her calmly, as if he did not just shatter her heart all over his bedroom floor. As Linda ran out, she heard the other girl laugh in the bedroom, and she wondered why she had to be the one who experienced the worst pain. She had been in 5 committed relationships through the course of her 24-years-old life, and all of them ended similarly to the way the one with Eric ended. She was confused. She and Eric were good. They had such a great time together, and she had even moved into his apartment some months back. If he knew that he was just going to treat her in that manner, why didn't he let her keep her apartment? Why did he watch her move her entire belongings to his apartment before he began to act insane? She was confused and she wanted to yell at Eric, but she had to hold on to the last shred of dignity she had, and she refused to call him. Her best friend Rachel was more than happy to welcome her into her place. But the issue was that Rachel's boyfriend, Chad, who worked abroad, was on his annual leave, and since Rachel was extremely busy at work and could not find time to travel on a vacation with him, he stayed at her place with her, and Linda settled for the uncomfortable leather couch in the living room. It was not comfortable, but she had no choice, because she had given up her quaint apartment for the beast of a man called Chad. And she was a barista at an upscale cafe, but the pay was not huge, and her savings were not hefty enough for her to get a place. She still needed to save for a few months, and she was lucky that she crashed at Rachel's place and ate her food. That saved her some money. One thing Linda observed was that it was difficult to cry when she slept on a leather couch. The tears slid down her face, fell on the chair, and made the leather stick to her face. That was one reason why she should have stopped crying. The other one was that Eric did not deserve her tears, but it was so difficult for her to stop crying. Rachel hated it when she saw her cry over Eric. She told her that she had always been too good for Eric, and that it was better that she was no longer with him. It was Rachel who dragged her back to the apartment 3 days after she had walked in on Eric and his old/new girlfriend, packed up her stuff that were left there and grabbed Eric's beige duvet, the same duvet that covered Linda's legs as she sat on the icky leather couch and cried her eyes out. Sometimes she wondered why the worst things happened to her. When Rachel sang in her ears for 2 consecutive days about how she deserved much more than Eric, Linda finally stopped crying. But she was still sad, and Rachel could see it. So Rachel asked her to get ready so that they could go out and have some fun. Linda did not want to go. The last thing she wanted to do was go out to some noisy bar and dance around sweaty strangers, return drunk, sleep, and wake up the next day to face her problems. But Rachel thought it was exactly what she needed, and she pushed and pushed until Linda finally dressed up and went out with her. Linda would say that the night out was actually a brilliant idea. She had danced, drank, cried out her problems to amused bartenders, spoke too loudly to the cute guy who bought drinks for her at the bar, flirted with the cute guy, and had a one-night stand with him. Then she returned home, or rather to Rachel's couch, and started trying to pick up herself. Rachel was right. The night out helped her. But Rachel was also wrong, because the night out added an extra layer to her burdens. A month later, her period ran late. So she took a pregnancy test, and it turned out positive. She knew whose baby it was. It could not be Eric's, because about a month before she caught him with his old/new girlfriend, they had not slept together. Eric always said that he was too busy or too tired or not in the mood. Then she spent a few weeks on Rachel's couch before she got dragged out to get rid of her problems in a club. The cute stranger also did not use protection. He said he was clean, and she said she was too. They were too heated in the moment to sit back for a moment and think about what they were doing, and the pregnancy was the result of their actions. Linda did not want to terminate the pregnancy. She knew that she was not in the right state to have a baby, but she also did not want to lose it. The emotions left her more conflicted than she was before the night out, and she burst out crying. Rachel advised her to go back to the cute stranger's apartment and tell him that she was pregnant. She said that maybe he would own up and help her when she needed help. But it all sounded weird to Linda. Was she supposed to trace back to a stranger's apartment, knock on his door, and when he opened it, she would throw a smile at him and inform him of her pregnancy? She said it was uber weird, and Rachel urged that it was the right thing to do. So, she said she would think about it. And she thought about it for 8 more months. In 8 months, Linda had, with Rachel's assistance, managed to rent a little apartment close to the cafe. Chad had long gone back to his place of work. Linda had given birth to a beautiful boy. Rachel still dwelled on the suggestion that Linda was supposed to tell the cute stranger, and Linda was beginning to see her point. It was difficult for her when she was pregnant. There were some days when all she wanted to do was to lie in bed and lick peanut butter straight from the container, but she was unable to because she had a job, which paid her bills to go to. And some nights, when it was difficult for her to fall asleep, she wanted to talk and talk until she drifted off, but there was no one for her to talk to. Rachel, bless her soul, tried. She spent the weekends over at Linda's. She stocked her fridge with groceries. She went to her doctor's appointments and did yoga exercises with her whenever she could. But there was only so much that she could do. And Linda considered reaching out to the cute stranger from the bar, but every day she postponed. And the pregnancy got older until it became stupid to show up with a several-month-old bump and inform a stranger that he was the father of the baby in her womb. So she just left it at that and took care of herself by herself. When she gave birth, Rachel was there. She held her hands and put flowers in her room. Linda's plan at first was that when she gave birth, she would hand the child over to an orphanage so that they would give him to a more stable parent that would take care of him in ways that she would be unable to. But when she held his soft pink body in her hands, plans changed. He looked so innocent and sweet, and she swore that she would never give him away. Until 7 years later. 7 years later, Rachel had gotten married to Chad, and she quit her job to move abroad with him. They still kept in contact over the phone, and Rachel sent her photos of the cute little puppy that they adopted, sent her photos of her meals to catch up with her lifestyle, and gave her fashion advice over FaceTime. It was great, really. Technology helped them keep their friendship for as long as they could, but it was not easy, especially with the time difference. In no time, the rate at which they texted began to reduce, and Linda barely knew anything about Rachel's life. Rachel, too, barely knew anything about Linda's life, including the condition that popped up for her. Her son, JT, had returned from school one day tired. She chalked it up to the cartoon he watched the previous night and asked him to go to bed, and he did. But when he woke up, it was with a deafening scream. She ran to meet him in his bedroom, and he said that he felt pains all over his knee. She did not understand what happened, but as he kept on crying, she fetched warm water from the kitchen and a soft towel so that she could apply pressure on the knee. She was sure that if she did, the pains would subside and her boy would bounce right back. How wrong she was. The pain kept increasing, and she had to rush him to the emergency ward. The doctors in the hospital needed time to diagnose the medical condition that could make a 6-year-old kid scream so loud and cry of body aches. They had various theories, but they were not 100% sure of any of them, and JT was still crying from the pain. So they gave him the lightest painkillers that they could find, and in a short while he went to sleep. Even in his sleep he whimpered, and once in a while his hand reached out to hold his right knee. Linda watched him as he slept. She was more confused than she had been in years, and she waited on the medical professionals for updates on her son's condition. And 3 days later, after a series of questioning, lots of cries from JT and laboratory tests, the doctors diagnosed the boy with fibromyalgia. When they asked Linda if he often forgot stuff or found it hard to concentrate, she said that he sometimes did, but she thought it was normal with kids. The doctors asked her a bunch of other questions about his sleep cycle, his appetite, his pain tolerance, and much other stuff that she had thought were not really necessary before they finally believed that the boy could be suffering from fibromyalgia. When the painkiller that they administered solely to combat fibromyalgia-related pain worked, they informed Linda of his condition. And they kept him under their supervision in the hospital for 2 extra days. A nurse briefed Linda on the condition, informed her of the do's and don'ts of the condition, told her that JT would be an extra responsibility, and advised her to be patient with him. Linda listened to everything in shock. How could her child go from being healthy to being so sick in just a matter of days, and she did not even see it coming. Maybe if he had a high temperature that morning or complained of a headache, she would have anticipated a breakdown. Again, fate did not care about her mental, emotional, or financial state before it hit her with an unexpected crisis, because she had just packed up most of her savings and used it to buy a car. And now she had to buy all the expensive drugs for JT. JT complained of headache at the slightest sound. She made coffee in the kitchen, and he said that the sound of the coffee maker affected his head, and he wanted to sleep. But when she put him to bed, he woke up 20 minutes later, all groggy and tired. She called his school to inform them of his condition, and she told them that whenever he was strong enough, he would return to school. But with the way he was moving, Linda wasn't sure that the school was the best option for him. If she was loaded, she definitely would have hired a private tutor for him. But she was struggling. Her credit cards were frowning at her, and her account shone red. She struggled to buy his last painkillers, and in no time, his body had gotten used to the painkillers, and she had to buy new ones. All the money that would have gone into her savings went straight up into JT's treatment. Her hair was due for a touch-up at the salon, and she had been surviving on leftovers so that she could buy the food items that the doctors advised her to buy for her son. But all that was not the main problem. The money that she was low on did not bother her as much as the state of her son. When she saw JT in bed looking up at the ceiling, her chest hurt. When he complained that his head hurt from watching 10 minutes of his favorite show, she felt bad. She hated it when she watched him struggle to swallow the pills that she handed over to him every day. And his condition did not seem to improve. Once he walked from the kitchen to the living room, and he began to cry that his feet hurt. She was asked to change his painkillers again, get him softer pillows, and if possible, since their apartment was closer to the subway, which could get loud at times, they could move to a more suitable area. Then Linda knew that she was not in the right condition to provide adequate care to her son. So she called the one person that she knew would come through for her. Rachel was mad that Linda did not tell her before then, and she promised to fly back over there as soon as she was able to. But in the meantime, she offered some money to Linda, who was extremely grateful for the help. Linda got the painkillers and the needed items, but she could not move them from the subway location, and it still affected JT. One night, as there was a loud noise from the streets below, she watched JT toss in bed, and she decided that she would use the leftover money from the one Rachel sent to her and check the boy into a residential treatment facility. She sat there in his room and searched for the closest ones to their location. When she saw the one that she liked, she researched it, and then she placed an appointment to drop off JT the next day. When JT woke up the next day, she got him ready and drove him down to where she was going to drop him off. She stole glances at him as she drove off and convinced herself that she was doing the right thing. When JT realized that his mom wanted to drop him off at a strange location, he cried and begged. But Linda had made up her mind the night before, so she just signed the papers that were dropped in front of her, and a lad who was dressed in a white dress tried to get JT to calm down. After she signed, she said goodbye to her teary son and walked out. She had done the right thing to check him into the facility. She would work and pay them to take care of her child, and he would do better in a serene environment. Yes, she had done the right thing. So, Linda went back home. For 2 months, she lived without JT. She went to work, she tidied up her apartment, she saved up every money that she made in hopes that it would be enough for the payment when next it was due. And at nights when the subway got noisy, she was glad that JT was not there. She was glad that she had checked him into the facility, and she began to utilize the spare time that she had for herself. She visited the salon to fix up her hair. She had her manicure and pedicure done. She slept when she was off duty. She watched sitcoms, and she scrolled through social media. It was nice to have time to herself again. For a long time, she felt like she had only been reacting to nature's action. She felt like she never acted of her own accord, but only did things in reaction to actions that was carried out towards her. And it was draining. She hated to admit it, but it was tiring to care for a sick child, and she was relieved that she finally had some time to herself. But when Rachel found out that she checked the boy into a residential facility, she was not in support of it. But Linda could not even be bothered by Rachel's opinion. Rachel was not there to see the pain that JT went through. She did not know how the noise bothered him. She knew nothing of JT's condition. Rachel did not know how badly the whole thing affected both of them. Linda was the one who suffered through it all, and yes, checking him into the facility was the right choice. And Linda was content with her stance. She was content until the day she dreamed that the facility caught fire and she could see JT upstairs in his room. The smoke fogged up his window, and his small hands banged frantically at the window until the flames engulfed him and his cries. She woke up with a start, and she could not sleep again that night. She felt as though the dream was actually coming through that night, and she could not wait for the morning so that she could go over there. When morning came, she hurried into her car and arrived at the facility as early as 8 a.m. The environment was still the same as the day she had checked her child in. It did not look affected by fire or any other disasters, but all she wanted was her son. And when he was finally let to see her, he ran to her with so much speed that she was worried he would complain about his health later. But that was later. Now, when he reached her, she put out both her arms and engulfed him in a tight hug. As he smiled up at her, she looked lovingly at him. She knew that she was going to leave with him that morning. How could she ever think that leaving him in the facility was the best thing for him? Yes, the noise affected him, but she could find a way around that, or not. But all she knew was that her son would go home with her, and they would combat the condition together. After all, love was said to conquer all things, and she had never felt more loved than how she felt as JT clung to her, as if he would never let go. Nick and Paul are brothers, but have always been different. Their age difference was 6 years, but their characters differed significantly. Nick started walking and talking early. He was admired by relatives and teachers at school, who also adored him. Nick was given all the things he needed. He excelled in the exact sciences in school. He quickly learned languages. Music teachers praised him. He was obedient and exemplary, and never had behavioral problems. Nick was successful in everything he undertook. He was sent to piano lessons early ages. He graduated from high school with flying colors. At the same time, he also mastered the guitar and violin. He performed at all school parties. Girls fell in love with him from an early age. Paul was born 6 years later. It was immediately apparent that the younger son differed significantly from the eldest. Paul started walking late. He categorically did not want to talk until the age of 4. Nick enjoyed eating healthy porridge. Paul demanded chocolate and sweets, although he had not yet mastered human speech. Nick slept soundly even as an infant. He didn't give his parents trouble. Paul screamed at night, and his mother sometimes regretted that she had given birth to a second child. The eldest son was always praised. They spoke about the youngest son with regret. The boy was hired a nanny, but she could not stand the stress that the restless baby brought to her. When he started to walk, he categorically did not want to obey rules. Nick was constantly held up as an example to Paul. Since infancy, he could not stand his lucky brother. Years passed. The attention of the girls surrounded Nick. He played the guitar very well. He could perform any popular song on guitar and win hearts. He was a welcome guest at any party. He had a lot of admirers. Also, he had a delicate taste. He always looked clean and neat. The girls considered him an enviable groom. Paul changed nannies constantly. No nanny could stand the boy's behavior. He often broke dishes and often freaked out in screams. Paul was in a lot of pain. In all his childhood photographs, he had disgusting snot. He started going to the potty late. His father and mother never raised a hand against Nick. Paul was spanked for every miss he had done. And there were many misdeeds in his behavior. A lot. The teachers at school couldn't stand the guy. He went to the same school as his brother. Teachers constantly compared the two brothers. They wondered how two completely different people could be born into the same family. At school, Paul was constantly bullied by his classmates, but soon the bullying stopped. The guy started fighting early. Nobody wanted to be associated with him. Many teachers said that only prison awaited him in the future. Paul hated Nick. Nick didn't hate his brother. Sometimes he even sympathized a little with him, but he didn't feel much love for him. Nick valued his reputation. The younger brother significantly damaged his reputation. Nick wanted to be a member of the perfect family. Parents fit into the picture of an ideal family, and Paul was a dirty spot in this family. Years passed. Nick had the first girl with whom he wanted to build a serious relationship. But when their mother saw Nick was in love with an ordinary girl, she decided to think twice. It seemed to her that Nick needed someone else, someone with a slightly higher social status. She was annoyed by Nick's feelings for a girl from a simple family. Isla was a nice girl. She looked lovingly at the intelligent and handsome guy. Nick reciprocated her. Sometimes his mother thought that Isla would have been more suitable for her goofy youngest son. Oh yes, mother would be happy to see Paul with Isla. The girls didn't like Paul. He had difficulty moving from class to class. He studied badly. He often interrupted classes. At home, his father's flogging awaited him every time. He learned to hate everyone. Bad relationships in the family led the guy into bad company. He started drinking and soon lost a large sum of money in gambling. He hid his debts from his parents. He knew they would never help him. At first, Paul tried to win back his money. He sold the gifts he received from his parents and his grandmother. The guys who demanded that Paul repay his debt as soon as possible hinted that he could take his mother's jewelry. They would be enough to pay off the debt. But he could not cross the line. Paul loved his parents. He combined love and hatred for those who were in his family. He dreamed of being like Nick. He wanted to see, in his mother's eyes, the same pride she felt for her eldest son. But all the rounds of applause went to Nick. All the pride went to his older brother. One terrible night, Paul was severely beaten. The guys told the gangsters that a guy owed them money. Anxious parents arrived at the hospital. The father demanded an explanation of why this happened to him. Paul thought bitterly that it was not his condition that worried his parents, but the problems he caused them. He felt that it would be easier for his father and mother if he were killed. Under his father's gaze, Paul admitted that he was beaten for his debts in gambling. His father didn't even scold him. He gave his son a contemptuous look. Later, his parents decided to help their youngest son at home at a family council. Nick objected. He believed that family money should not have gone to support an irresponsible villain. The parents were saving up some money for their eldest son to buy a separate apartment. Nick was furious that all the savings were spent on the youngest son. Paul had a lot of debt. His father found out the total amount and paid off the debts. Nick began to hate his brother even more. Paul felt guilty. Guilt gnawed at him. But still, his parents' attitude killed his sincerity in him. The father called his son to talk when the guy got recovered. The amount that the parents spent on Paul's debts was huge. His father said he had to work hard to return the money. Paul looked at his father in amazement. The amount was so large that it might take several years to repay. And then there was college. His father said that Paul would have to leave for hard work instead of college. A massive construction project was going on in the next town. Strong young people were being recruited there with 3 years contracts. Under the agreement, the workers were fed and provided with work clothes. But they were paid money only after the construction was completed. No loving parent would send their child there. But Paul's father believed the youngest son had to work off the debt that way. Paul was even more disappointed in his parents, but he wasn't bright enough to finish college. He had no plans for the future. So he agreed to the conditions. He thought about how nice it was to not see his parents and Nick for several years. And it was an excellent chance to pay off the debt. The departure of the unloved son took place quickly. Nobody said kind words to him. His mother didn't even kiss Paul goodbye. Nick didn't even talk to his brother, who was away for 3 years. His father briefly wished his son good luck and warned him not to get involved in more problems. The old bus took Paul away from home. The work at the construction site was tricky. He did not expect such difficult working conditions. Food was scarce. His clothes were always dirty. They worked for 60 hours a week in hot and cold weather. His legs and back hurt. Many could not stand it and went home, giving up. But Paul had nowhere to go. To his surprise, he was drawn into the work with his head. The result was challenging and exhausting, but the guy quickly learned to make it easier for himself. He thought for a long time about why there was such a poor work organization at such a large-scale construction. Once the construction manager, Mr. Smith, visited the site. Paul mustered up his courage and approached the chief. Mr. Smith was surprised at the guy's courage, but listened to him. He did not answer his suggestions, but it was clear that the words of the bold young builder made him think. The following day, Mr. Smith brought together the leaders of the construction teams and instructed them to make changes according to Paul's idea. After the meeting, he called the head of the detachment where Paul worked and said the guy should be encouraged. Paul was not just encouraged, he got a real promotion. His work was not so hard now, but he had to work with his brain instead. He heard praises addressed to him for the first time in his miserable life. After a year of hard work, his body became lean, strong, and muscular. His appearance became attractive. There was no exhausting work in the new position for him, but it took a lot of thinking and planning. The guy started reading books about his niche. Knowledge gave him an impetus for new ideas in construction. He became so bold that he called Mr. Smith to talk one day. It was surprising, but John Smith willingly agreed to the meeting. Paul's ideas seemed very reasonable to him. After this conversation, Smith thought the guy's brilliant brain would be helpful to him, not just at a construction site. He offered the guy to work in his office in an excellent managerial position. John Smith was surprised that the guy had no education. He was ready to pay for his college by signing a new contract. Under the agreement, Paul had to work for his company after all the years of research and another 5 years after graduation. The salary offered was high above the average. Paul didn't immediately agree. He could not believe in his strength and mental abilities for a long time. From an early age, he was told he was irresponsible and unlucky. He hardly thought that he could succeed in things. But John Smith, a prominent construction company owner, believed in him. Father, mother, and brother did not believe in Paul, but the millionaire businessman believed in him. The guy agreed to the terms of his boss. His career developed rapidly. The guy became a member of the house of a successful chef. Soon he met John Smith's daughter. He was in no hurry to start a relationship with her. Paul believed that he was unworthy of a beautiful girl from a wealthy family. Stephanie was terrific and educated on the other side. She liked a handsome guy with a muscular physique. All her childhood, her parents inspired her that the main thing in a person is his personal qualities. She was many times made marriage proposals by guys who pursued selfish goals. Her admirers were the spoiled sons of wealthy parents. Her father did not forbid her to make her own choice, but he warned against such a relationship. But when Stephanie fell in love with Paul, her father approved this choice. 6 months later, in a new job, Paul sent his parents the money he owed them. He sent him an even more considerable sum. And 6 months later, Paul married and invited the whole family to the wedding. Mother and father came to a magnificent wedding. They were surprised at how their youngest son had changed. Mother cried and constantly wanted to kiss and hug Paul. In his father's eyes, Paul saw the very pride he had dreamed of getting since his childhood. Also, Stephanie's family became his family. His wife was proud of him. Her father was proud of him. The entire Smith family respected and loved him. Paul did not show that he was indifferent to the feelings of his mother and father. He greeted them warmly and asked why Nick hadn't come. The guy was surprised that the older brother did not attend the wedding. and he was also surprised that the parents were reluctant to talk about the eldest son. After the wedding, his mother and father left for their city. Before parting, they begged Paul to come to them more often. Paul promised, but he knew he would not keep the promise. He wanted to know one thing: his brother. A few months later, Paul and his young wife arrived in their hometown. He knew that his parents had bought his brother an apartment. Paul called his brother and was surprised Nick was glad to see him. But before visiting his brother, he nevertheless visited his parents. The father told his youngest son a heartbreaking story. Nick graduated from college, but was unable to work in his field. He considered himself more intelligent than his superiors, commented to his leaders, and could not hold on to any job. He criticized colleagues, and other employees did not like him. His mother was able to separate Nick from his first love. Nick experienced this shallowness very hard and began to drink. He had no friends because Nick believed that they were unworthy of him. He listened to classical music and read books, and even his friends worked, earned money, and built their families. The women Nick liked didn't even look at him. Nick spent his evenings alone at the piano or with the violin. Every evening he drank alcohol, played music for himself, and hated the whole world. The world was unfair to him. That's what the guy thought. At first, Nick's parents supported him, but he could not forgive them that they spent a large amount on the debts of their younger brother, and this amount was enough to buy Nick a house. Even once he stole jewelry from his mother and sold them. Nick believed that everyone was unfair to him. He was glad to see Paul. Nick was sure that luck fell on his unlucky brother by accident. He expected to see that stupid guy, but with money? He planned to ask his brother for money and perhaps for a good job. Their meeting shocked both. Nick stopped being a handsome guy. From daily drinking, his skin became flabby and wrinkled. The guy no longer had that proud posture. Nick looked older and tired of life, tired of everything. But there was still a twinkle of arrogance in his eyes. When he saw his younger brother, he was shocked. Paul looked robust, young, and lucky. Next to him was a beautiful woman. Nick felt terrible envy, looking at his brother's wife. The brothers hugged. Paul refused to drink. Nick began to complain to his brother about his fate. His apartment was dirty. Paul wanted to get out of there as soon as possible. Stephanie felt a little sick. She was in her second month of pregnancy. Nick worriedly invited Stephanie to lie down. The older brother asked Paul for money, but Paul replied, "Nick, I won't give you money. I'll try to get you a job, but you won't get a prestigious position right now. My company values experience and the ability to work. Also, I see your empty fridge. I will go to the store and buy you some groceries." Nick was expecting something different. Even greater envy and malice settled in his soul. Paul left the apartment, and Stephanie fell asleep on Nick's uncleaned couch. Nick looked at the sleeping girl, and his desire to possess her grew. She was beautiful and rich. He thought for a long time about how unfair life was to him. Paul had been a non-entity since childhood. Stephanie just doesn't know what a real man is, thought Nick, and he went to the sofa where his brother's wife lay. He caressed the sleeping girl and put his hand under her blanket. Stephanie immediately woke up, screaming and fighting back, but Nick used force. Paul was already approaching the apartment with food packages. Hearing screams, he hurried to his brother's apartment. These were the cries of his beloved wife. The door was open. In a minute, Paul pushed Nick away from Stephanie and sat his wife in a chair. With one blow, his brother fell unconscious. Nick fell to the floor and began to squeal in pain. Paul called the police. Nick didn't harm Stephanie and the baby much, but he left a few bruises on her arm. These traces were enough for the police to record the attempted violence. The neighbors heard the fact that the girl loudly called for help. Nick was taken to the police. He was sentenced to prison for attempted rape. The parents of Nick and Paul did not help their eldest son. They finally realized how unfair they were to their youngest child. Soon, a girl was born in Paul's family. Paul's parents wanted to babysit their granddaughter. They tried to get close to their youngest son, but Paul did not want to communicate with them. Finally, he understood one important thing from his life. He believed that his parents betrayed him many years ago. Now, he considered his family, Stephanie, and his baby. Any minute now. Leah paced the room back and forth. She was restless. She glanced at the telephone from time to time, expecting a phone call. Any minute now. Leah, will you please sit down? Carol said, tired of seeing her daughter walking around the room. Calm down, okay? We'll find him. Calm down? Mom, can you hear yourself? How can I calm down when Dad is held captive by some ruthless criminals? We don't even know where he is, Leah replied, her eyes watery. How can you be okay with this, Mom? And what exactly do you mean by that? Carol indignantly replied. It has been 5 years and you still can't forgive him. Can you at least try to act worried? Leah now burst into tears. How dare you? Carol became tearful as well. You have no idea what I'm going through right now. I may be mad at your father, but I still love him. Just like you, I am worried. The sudden ring of the phone echoed through the sparsely furnished house, startling the two women. Leah immediately dashed to receive the call, wiping the tears off her cheek. Hello? Leah? Yes, speaking. Wait, Martin? Leah recognized that voice. She was surprised that he had called her. Martin? Your half-bro... Carol interrupted, but before she could finish, Leah cut her off. Mom, wait. He has the right to know. He is Dad's son anyway, Leah told her mom and immediately returned to the phone. Listen, Martin, Dad has been kidnapped. He has been gone for 38 hours now. I've been waiting for the kidnappers to call. They may ask for ransom money. Yes, the kidnappers called a few minutes ago, Martin cut in. What? The kidnappers called you instead of us? Yeah. Are you unaware that Dad used our telephone number as his home? No, never mind. What do the kidnappers want? Stop smoking, will you? Shut up, Ryan, Leah heard Martin and another guy arguing over the phone. Sorry about that. Just my brother being nosy. Anyway, the kidnappers specifically asked for $1 million. They gave me the address, so it would be better if I give them the money and rescue our father. Wait, what? $1 million? That is more than Dad's share with the company. Where on earth are we going to get that? $1 million? Carol exclaimed. She has been eavesdropping on the conversation. Listen here, little sis. You find ways to get that money within 48 hours and we'll do the rest. I have Brian here to help me. Me? Come on, Martz. Oh, and remember, don't tell the cops. The kidnappers specifically mentioned that, Martin said, ignoring Carol and his brother. Where are we going to get that much money? Leah asked her mom after ending the call with Martin. She fell to her knees in sadness. It seemed as though there was no way out. They can help us find that much money, you know. Your half-brother can work, Carol suggested. Mom, they've been relying on Dad's support for their living, and we only have 48 hours. I know. I'll just tell the cops then, Leah said. We already reported that your father is missing, and didn't you hear what your half-brother said? Don't tell the police, Carol replied. Fine, I'll go and make a loan then. I'll use my house as collateral. Leah decided and went straight to her parents' room to look for something that might help her. In Leah's mind, it seemed impossible to get a loan of $1 million, and even if she did manage to get it within 48 hours, how were they going to pay it off? As she rummaged through her father's belongings, a flurry of thoughts consumed her mind, like ravens eating away at her peace. She came across papers, bills, company files, business cards, and surprisingly, a cigarette butt. Her father never smoked, as she knew him at least. On her way to the bank, she realized how much she loved her father. She is willing to give up her house for him. This was her time to show how much she loved him, a simple sacrifice for all the good things he had done for her, even though he kept a secret from her and her mother, a horrible secret that could have ended their happy family. She stopped by the police station and told them everything she and Martin had discussed over the phone. The police kept asking her where the location was and who her half-brother was so they could go to him and interrogate him about the site. Listen here, young lady. We need to know your father's location so we can rescue him. Don't worry, we will be careful. We also need the number the kidnapper called and the number the kidnappers used to call. We might track them and get more accurate information," the officer explained. His enormous stomach hung over his belt, making it look like he waddled whenever he walked around the station. "Martin said the kidnapper called their telephone number as it was the home number that father is using," Leah timidly replied. "You mean this number here?" The police gave her the ID of her father. "Yeah, you left it when you reported that he is missing." "Wait, this is our telephone number," Leah said, perplexed. Her father used their number as his home number. Why would Martin lie? "May I know the complete name of your brother so that I can put it here on our records?" "Oh, his name is Martin Edwards," she told the police. "Martin Edwards? You mean this guy?" The officer showed her a picture of a guy. A drawing of a bearded man and the word "Wanted" was written on the top of the poster in red block letters. Leah's jaw dropped. She nodded as a response to the cop. It was him. It was Martin. "This guy here, your brother is a fugitive. He is a notorious thief with his apprentice." He paused, giving Leah a moment to process the information he had just provided her. And then it struck her. Martin. The guy she thought she could trust. The guy that she always defended from her mother. The guy she ultimately accepted as her brother betrayed her. She never thought that Martin could do it to their father. No wonder he never stayed home. Leah told the police about his whereabouts. When they reached the small apartment, which looked like no one had lived in for years, the walls had paint peeling off, exposing moss maps. Leah grew more worried as every minute went by. She called her mother to give her an update. "Hello, Mom. Martin is a fraud." She went on, telling her the whole story. "Oh, I was supposed to tell you that you can use our old house as collateral, but never mind that. Tell the cops to do everything to capture that criminal." Her mother was now enraged. "Wait, that's right. Our old house." She ended the call and drove away. Leah hurriedly walked inside an old house. Its walls were covered in ivy, and its glass windows were shattered. The place looked abandoned entirely. It was not surprising that the house had been unoccupied. This was where she experienced hell. It was 5 years ago when it all began. It was her 18th birthday, and she was celebrating with her friends when she heard screams from her parents' room. It was her 18th birthday, and she was celebrating with her friends when she heard screams from her parents' room. She tiptoed to see what was happening and heard her mother shouting at her dad. "How could you?" her mother shouted. "When did you plan to tell me about this?" "Carol, please, I'm sorry," she heard her dad. He sounded like a dog that whined just before it was about to be kicked. He seemed lost for words. The pain from the past came in waves, consuming her. When she remembered that moment, everything around her froze, and all she could do was stand and stare ahead, lost for words. A loud bang brought her back to the present, and she tried to make the sound. It must be them, she thought. A burning desire to kill crept through her veins. She crept into the kitchen like a thief in the night and grabbed a knife. The least she could do was have something to protect herself. Slowly she walked up the wooden stairs, almost tiptoeing, ensuring to avoid the creaky wooden floorboards. She didn't want to be heard and reached the second floor undetected. Breathing heavily, she looked for the source of the noise. All she could hear were whispers and muffled voices trying to shout. She heard it. The voices floated through the wall, and her ears perked when she heard her father's voice. All she wanted to do was go in and save her father, but did she have the courage to do so? The tiny room had 3 men. One looked older, with his face covered with a beard and a scar across his left cheek. The other looked fearful, as though he had not agreed to what was happening in the room. A piece of cloth was stuck inside his mouth, and the final man was tied to a chair in the corner of the room. "Oh, look who's here, Brian. It's my half-sister," the older guy said. "Hi, sis. You here to rescue Dad? Did you bring the money?" It was indeed them, her stepbrothers, and when she saw them, her mind jumped back many years to the moment her father introduced her stepbrothers. After her parents' argument, she learned more about her brothers when she stalked them. She hid at the back of her father's car to see where he was going. Unfortunately, her father saw her. Leah, I know you're there. Come out now, her dad said. I think it's time you meet them. Meet who, Dad? She asked. You'll see. I love you and your mom always, but do you promise to forgive me? I'm about to show you a mistake I made 13 years ago when I thought I couldn't get your mother pregnant. They walked inside a small apartment. Leah noticed the house was sparsely furnished, and there were old toys in one corner of the room, unlike her new shiny ones. There was a beautiful young woman the same age as her mom, and two little boys. They hid behind their mother, who was seated at the table. Leah, I want you to meet Martin, your half-brother, and Brian, his brother. From then on, she was on good terms with her half-brother's family, even though her mother was skeptical about it. Brought back to reality with Martin's cough, she looked at him angrily and spoke. How dare you, Martin? I trusted you. We trusted you. I should have listened to my mother, Leah shouted at him. Oh, come on. You are so gullible, dear sister. You see, Father made us feel less than people when he tried to hide us from the world. He gave you and your witch of a mother all the attention. He never looked as happy with us as he is with you. Martin started while walking around his father's chair. My mother died with a heavy heart. She died begging your father to love her. She wanted us to have a good future, but our father's financial support was never enough. Come on, little sis, just give us the money, and we'll all live happily ever after, Martin continued. So now you want us to strip ourselves of everything we have? We won't have anything left for us, Leah reasoned, trying to buy some time. No, of course not. You will still have your father with you, Martin sarcastically pointed to his father. I'm sure you'll get along with him just fine. Now give me the money. No, Martin, I don't have anything for you, Leah said, keeping her eye on Martin. But they do. She looked toward the entrance, where a squad of cops burst in. Following her were cops loaded with guns. She tipped the police before she went inside the house that this may be the place that held her father captive. It was these two culprits that took her father. Martin tried to jump out of the broken window at the back, but before he could do anything, one of the cops already had his hands on him. The two guys didn't have a choice but to surrender. Handcuffed, Martin threw Leah a look of hate and anger. She walked over to her father and untied his hands, saying, Don't worry, Dad. We are safe now. Let's go home. Leah, with her father, rode home. There, waiting at the door, was Carol. Tears rolled down her rosy cheeks as she ran and hugged her husband and Leah. I missed you. I don't know what I'd do without you. You got us so worried, Carol told her husband while he held her in a warm embrace. You are so brave, dear, Leah heard her father speak to her. I love you. It all seemed surreal. She couldn't help but feel like she was on cloud 9. I love you too, Dad, Mom, she said. A wave of relief washed over her, and all she wanted to do was eat peanut butter and jam sandwiches with her dad while they watched a Disney movie by the fireplace. The breezy morning in Canada woke Max up from his regular, tiresome day. He rubbed his eyes, looking out the window through its broken barriers. The 17-year-old man made his bed, planning for the day in his mind. It was an everyday routine for him to go to the paper factory and get his bundle of newspapers delivered. He had a list of tasks to complete before the town even woke up. Having called ready with his everyday jersey and the same old pair of jeans, he stepped out the door. There was no man on the street, just his bicycle waiting for him to accompany it to every doorstep of the listed areas in his delivery list. He didn't have to look at it twice, as he already knew the addresses by heart. The air hit his freshly woken up face, so he pedaled the bicycle to the newspaper office. The bundle was already in the rack where the delivery boys could pick it from. He made his way with the rising sun, pedaling his way to each of the big houses. They were nothing like the tiny space he called home, which was just a rental apartment, the shabbiest of them all. His deceased parents had given him nothing, but a friend who did the generosity of letting him live on rent in one of his quarters. Delivering every newspaper in the rack he had gotten done as the sun stood above his head by 6 a.m. like every other day. Only his side job was done. His career of working as a baker in the bakery had the whole day to go. He cycled down to the town square. The little old-style bakery, Toppings, stood in the middle of several other shops. Opening the door with his keys, he switched the lights on time and earlier than everyone else. Max always was. "Good morning, Toppings," he said, closing the door behind him. The tag of the bakery still showed closed to the outside. Wiping every table, sweeping every tile, and baking the essential first-hour needs, he finally turned the tag to open. In no time, people were marching in with breakfast orders. He slowly watched the seats get filled with young students and middle-aged people going to their offices. "Oh, Maxie, what would I do without you?" Camilla, the old lady in charge of the reception, walked inside it wearing her apron. Max smiled in relief. Now, his job was only to handle the baking of things. The smell of freshly baked bread and croissants brought the young boy a different sort of happiness. It was a sweet sense of comfort, as if the place was his natural home. Since he started working in this bakery as a young boy, only 15 years old, baking has been his art form. The activity that brought him absolute pleasure and peace started as a sweeper, but he learned how to bake from Robert, who generously passed on his skills to Max. His dream was to open a bakery of his own and keep his favorites and the best-made bakery delights in his bakery. For things from all over the world for his customers' taste buds, he was eager to learn more recipes that people from around the world enjoyed. It was not only a wish, but a dream for which he worked every day, which motivated him to wake up the earliest and work the hardest. Max took every tip as a saving, consuming and enjoying very little of what he earned. He rarely had any shopping desires. All that he made went into his savings for the startup of his dream business and necessary expenses. Every day, Camilla would give him $1 for working so hard with him, other than his pay. Each of those dollars had been saved and very well kept in his little bag that he hid in his apartment. He rode his bike back to his quarter. It had become nighttime all over the city. Turning the door lock, he pushed the key in. The resisting door allowed no opening motion. A frown appeared on Max's face as he tried to open it again, but to no avail. A minute later, the doorknob turned, and a man appeared inside his apartment. "Yes?" he questioned. Max frowned sternly. "What are you doing in my house, sir?" Max questioned, pushing the door open. He was furious at the man for having trespassed without his permission. "Your house? Are you the guy that hasn't paid the rent?" the tall, bulky man replied. "I've paid all rents. Get out of my house, sir," Max replied, not falling for anything the man said. He pushed the door further, and the man stopped with his single foot. "Mr. Shelby said he wanted to change tenants since you are not paying the rent duly," he explained. "He threw your stuff out and said I could live here now, so please do not disturb again," the man informed, pointing behind Max and slamming the door in his face. "What?" Max said, turning behind and seeing his things lying under the tree outside his house. He quickly went up to his bags lying on the street. Opening them, he had only one thing in mind. Where was the bag that had his savings? "Oh, no, 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 no!" He kept murmuring with tears in his eyes. Every penny of his savings was gone, and the little bag was lying empty. He sat on the street, leaning against the tree with his shoulder bag in his hand. Mr. Shelby was a big man. There was no way he could claim anything on him. All his thoughts felt blurry in his mind as tears dropped, reflecting his confusion. He did not know who to go to, but there was only one man to question, Mr. Shelby. Walking up to his porch, he knocked on the man's door, guilty of his agony. It was pretty late at night, although, against his mannerisms, Max found it all right to strike again on the lack of response. If he was to spend the night on the road, it was no problem for someone to have their sleep disturbed for a little while. "What is it, boy? Look at the time, will you?" The pale white man opened the door, tying the knot on his sleeping robe. "Sir, why did you throw me out? Where am I supposed to go?" he pleaded, hoping to receive some mercy from the fat man. I do not care. You are paying too less. I've given the place to a man that pays well," he roughly replied. "Without notice?" Max held his hands out helplessly. "I do what I like with my place," he scorned back. Max knew at that point there was no benefit in arguing with the old man. "Where is the money from this bag?" He came straight to the question he was concerned with. Don't you worry about that. It's in safe hands," he chuckled. Max could not believe it. After all his wealth, he was greedy enough to take the little savings of a poor orphan boy who saved it by eating less, spending less, and surviving on nothing but water and bread. "That's my money." "Not anymore, it isn't. Now get out of my porch, will you? Don't come bugging me with any of your questions anymore." Mr. Shelby slammed the door in his face. His eyes had a million questions behind them, and the hands holding his bag were helpless at the situation. He turned around, looking for a bench he could spend his sleepless night on. The shivering cold welcomed him with open arms of a breeze. The night on the bench did more than one thing for him. It gave him the strength to fight more pain than he ever knew and more determination for his dreams. Mr. Shelby had only taken his money and his house because he was more powerful, prosperous, and not accountable. Max watched the stars all night, promising himself he would remain honest and generous no matter how powerful and wealthy he was getting. Eventually, as the days passed, he got used to spending the night outside on the bench. The cold, too, failed to bother him in the quest. He would survive off of anything he could find to eat, and his job at the bakery still paid him enough, but he promised himself not to live on rent anymore. He would save that money and fulfill his dream. Every day and every weather, no matter how harsh or deadly, he would spend the nights of winter rains and hungry stomach outside. Mr. Walker had taken everything from him, but he failed to take away his determination. Saving all that he had, he decided not to wait any longer. The poor boy started selling bread on a stall he would bake in the bakery's ovens. He would invest whatever he had in the business instead of waiting for the savings to get bigger, meeting people of all kinds of greed, cruelty, and harshness. Sometimes kids would bully him and tear his stall away. He would change neighborhoods, selecting which one to stay in about how badly the people would treat a homeless man. Year after year, his little business grew by a few inches. Sometimes he would bake more and get a good sale. Sometimes the loss was written in his fate. For the first few years, getting his baked things to sell was the biggest challenge. Nobody was familiar with the taste of his stalls, and people avoided eating street food for hygiene. But he kept trying to get a good sale, saving anything extra he would make of his profit to open the bakery of his dreams. 10 years later. The well-dressed man got out of his car, with the journalist and cameraman following him at every footstep. The cameras flashed as the journalist followed him for the documentary they were making on him. He looked at the bench under the tree. It was broad daylight, but memories of a cold night swept across his mind. "Oh my God, was this the exact bench?" The journalist quickly instructed his cameraman to take a shot of it. The journalist belonged to a business magazine. He covered great business people who started from significantly less and reached their dreams at best. "Yes," the wealthy businessman replied. "Being the owner of Canada's biggest bakery franchise today, what do you think when you see this bench, sir?" The journalist questioned a question too heavy for the man to answer. It was the bench he had spent his homeless nights on that gave him refuge from the burden of anyone's favor. "That I am proud of myself for not giving up, proud of myself for not turning greedy and cruel like the people that brought me down, now that I am in their place of being rich and wealthy." Is there any advice you would like to give the young generation watching this? I had nothing. Max was just another street boy. Today, I'm the tycoon Max Stewart because the street boy chose never to give up. I've worked day and night restlessly, eating nothing, sleeping much less, and saving up for my dreams. I started with a stall of bread, and now I own the most number of bakeries in the country, he went on. Be grateful for what you have, but never fail to strive for more is what I've learned and what I'd love to teach. He smiled, looking behind him at the door of Mr. Shelby's house that was rusty and abandoned today. He was happy that door was slammed on him that day. It taught him much more than success and his savings could have ever taught him.